You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. When we take a step back and carefully examine the events surrounding the takedown of R. Kelly, one thing becomes abundantly clear: this was not an organic movement of women suddenly finding their voices. It was not a spontaneous uprising of alleged victims demanding justice. Instead, it was a carefully orchestrated ploy engineered and driven by people in power, most notably then Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx, and executed with the help of mainstream media corporations, particularly through the vehicle of the Surviving R. Kelly documentary. From the very beginning, Kim Foxx positioned herself not as a neutral prosecutor but as someone eager to gain political capital by taking down a celebrity. She inserted herself into the narrative early, making public appeals for alleged victims to come forward, long before any formal charges were filed. This unusual step demonstrated bias and put into motion a chain of events that destroyed the presumption of innocence. It sent a message to the public and to jurors down the line that guilt was already assumed. The Surviving R. Kelly documentary served as the centerpiece of this campaign. Produced and promoted in close partnership with major media networks, and with the shadow of Sony lingering in the background, the documentary was less about exposing truth and more about preparing the battlefield. Its purpose was to frame the story, cement a one-sided narrative in the minds of viewers, and strip R. Kelly of any possibility of a fair trial. When we look at who appeared in this documentary and later on various television interviews, we see a pattern. Many of the women who spoke out were not children. They were not underage girls manipulated against their will. They were grown adult women. Women like Andrea Kelly, R. Kelly's ex-wife, Ashanti McGee, Lisa Van Allen, Lonita Carter, Kitty Jones, and several others. These women entered relationships with R. Kelly willingly. They were not snatched from their families, chained in basements, or trafficked across borders as the media sensationalized. They were adult women who at the time described themselves as being in love with him, enjoying the wealth, lifestyle and access that came with being associated with a global superstar. So how does a group of women who willingly engaged in adult relationships years later rebrand themselves as victims? That question cuts to the heart of this injustice. The answer lies in the power of media manipulation, and the lure of fame, attention, and in some cases money. Think about it carefully. At the time of their relationships with R. Kelly, none of these women ever filed charges. None of them went to the police. None of them sought restraining orders or legal remedies. On the contrary, many of them remained in his orbit for years, enjoying the lifestyle, traveling and living off his success as adult women. But when the tide of public opinion began to turn, when the government and media made it clear that R. Kelly was the target, suddenly these women re-emerged armed with stories tailor-made for daytime television. Andrea Kelly, his ex-wife, is a prime example. During their marriage, she had the lifestyle of a celebrity spouse. After the divorce, she moved on with her life, even publicly praising R. Kelly at one point. Yet when the cameras rolled for Surviving R. Kelly, she reinvented herself as a battered ex-wife narrating stories of alleged abuse that she had never pursued in court. Why the transformation? The cameras, the platform, and the opportunity to rewrite history made it possible. Ashanti McGee, another name that repeatedly came up, also told stories that shifted depending on the platform. On one network she portrayed herself as a woman trapped and controlled, while on another she described voluntary trips and interactions that revealed contradictions. Lisa Van Allen too has a history of inconsistent statements, at times even admitting to participating in acts willingly but later portraying herself as a manipulated victim. Lonita Carter, whose accusations were used to breathe life into old claims, surfaced just when the media cycle needed another headline. And Kitty Jones, another adult woman, presented her relationship as toxic only after it had ended. The common thread here is not victimhood but opportunism. These women were not children preyed upon with no ability to consent. They were adults who made choices. And when those choices no longer yielded the benefits they once enjoyed, they rebranded themselves as survivors. The question then becomes, Why were they allowed to dominate the media landscape with their stories? The answer lies in the broader strategy. The government and its allies in the media understood that to take down someone as wealthy, influential and beloved as R. Kelly, they couldn't rely on facts alone. They couldn't rely on the courtroom alone. They needed to poison the well of public opinion long before the trial even began. By parading these women on every major television network from morning shows to primetime specials, they created a drumbeat of negativity that no juror could ignore. It's important to note, these media appearances were not neutral interviews. They were rehearsed, produced and edited to deliver maximum emotional impact. The media wasn't reporting. It was storytelling, packaging these women's narratives as entertainment under the guise of justice. And this is where the prejudice began. Long before the courtroom doors opened, R. Kelly had already been convicted in the court of public opinion. Jurors are supposed to come into a trial impartial, but who in America hadn't heard of Surviving R. Kelly? Who hadn't seen Andrea Kelly crying on television, or Lisa Van Allen recounting her story? By the time jurors were selected, they had been marinating in these narratives for months if not years. So if these women were not actual victims, why exactly did they speak out? For some, it was about attention. The allure of being in the spotlight, of being part of a cultural moment. For others, it was about money, book deals, paid interviews, appearance fees and the prospect of being cast as a survivor in a society that rewards victimhood. For others it was personal. Bitterness over broken relationships, jealousy or the simple desire to rewrite their own choices in a way that absolves them of responsibility. In all cases, the effect was the same: they became useful pawns in a larger agenda. The government needed a public outcry to justify extraordinary charges and to secure a conviction under laws that were stretched and misapplied. The media needed ratings and few stories to generate more clicks than the downfall of a celebrity. Together they created a feedback loop. The government encouraged the women to come forward, the media amplified their voices, and the public outrage pressured the courts. What we witnessed was not justice but a staged performance. A trial by media before a trial by law. The women were the actors, the networks were the directors and the government was the producer. R. Kelly, stripped of his presumption of innocence, was the scapegoat. This is why we must be careful in accepting narratives at face value. Adult women who willingly engaged in relationships cannot retroactively declare themselves victims simply because the relationship ended badly, or because the cultural moment shifted. To allow such a standard is to erase the line between personal choices and actual crimes. The truth is simple: R. Kelly's so-called victims were never victims in the legal sense. They were participants in relationships that they later regretted or sought to exploit for attention and gain. Their sudden transformation into survivors was not about justice but about politics, profit and publicity. And it worked. It worked to create prejudice. It worked to paint R. Kelly as a monster in the public's eyes before he ever had the chance to defend himself. It worked to poison jurors, making it impossible for him to receive a fair trial. This is why we must continue to question, to challenge and to expose the truth. Because if the system can do this to R. Kelly, building a case not on evidence but on orchestrated media narratives by victim adult women, then it can do anything to anyone. And that should concern us all. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say? To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.